You know, when we think about the Great Depression, our minds usually jump straight to one thing, the 1929 stock market crash. But what if I told you that was just the opening act? What if the real story, the actual cause of a decade of global hardship, was hiding in plain sight the whole time? All right, let's really get into it and uncover what was actually going on.
So picture this. It's Thursday, October 24th, 1929. In just a few hours, $10 billion in investments, which is well over $100 billion in today's money, just poof, vanished. That day became known as Black Thursday, and believe me, it was only the beginning of the panic.
I mean, you can just feel the absolute chaos, right? The historical accounts describe these stunned investors just flooding the streets, totally desperate for answers as the market they'd poured their faith into was just crumbling right in front of them. The big-shot bankers, they tried to stop the bleeding, but the fear, it was contagious, and that sell-off was about to become a full-blown avalanche. And just look at the sheer scale of this collapse. This wasn't some minor dip in the market. U.S. Steel went from $262 a share all the way down to $22. General Motors, one of the giants of this new consumer age, dropped from $73 to just $8. Entire fortunes that took lifetimes to build were completely wiped out in a matter of days. So that brings us to the big question. For decades, right, the crash gets all the blame. It's the one thing everyone points to. But the evidence, it tells a much, much more complicated story. And here is your first huge clue. You know, despite all the hype about Wall Street, a tiny, tiny fraction of the population, just 2.5%, actually owned any stock. So you gotta ask, how could an event that directly affected so few people bring the entire country and a lot of the world to its knees?
Okay, so this is the crucial point. The crash didn't cause the Great Depression, it revealed it. Think of it like a high fever. The fever isn't the illness itself, it's the sign that something is really, really wrong inside the body. The crash was that fever, and it showed that the economy had been sick for years. So let's peel back those layers and take a look at the cracks.
All right, first up, the Roaring '20s. We all had this image of it being this amazing era of prosperity and parties, but just beneath all that glitter, the foundations were seriously unstable. This chart just says it all, doesn't it? Yeah, sure, the average income for all Americans went up about 10%, which sounds okay. But the income for the wealthiest 1%, it shot up by 75%. That gap between the rich and literally everyone else wasn't just big, it was getting bigger at an incredible speed.
And listen, this kind of inequality wasn't some accident. It was practically policy. The presidents of the 20s, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, they all had this pro-business, hands-off approach. All these low taxes and easy credit were supposed to fuel investment. But what really happened was all that cash got funneled to the richest investors, who then poured it into luxury goods and, you guessed it, the booming stock market bubble.
The 1920s was really the birth of modern consumerism, right? You had brand new advertising techniques, a rising celebrity culture, factories were just pumping out these amazing new things like cars and radios, and everyone was being told they had to have one. But here's the fatal flaw. By the late 20s, pretty much everyone who could actually afford a car or a new radio already had one. Demand was just drying up.
And get this is a wild fact. Even during the so-called boom times, unemployment was sitting around 7%. That means a huge chunk of the population never even had the money to join in on this new consumer economy in the first place, which made that demand problem even worse.
And it wasn't just a problem in the cities. While the cities were roaring, rural America was already stuck in a deep depression. After a short boom during World War I, farm prices just totally collapsed, and they stayed low for the whole decade. So by 1929, millions of American farm families were already buried in debt. Their crisis started way before Black Tuesday. So we've got these deep structural cracks already running through the economy. Now let's talk about how a series of really bad decisions and a wave of pure human panic turned a tough situation into an absolute unprecedented catastrophe. This quote from President Hoover in 1930, it just perfectly captures the disconnect, right? The country is sliding deeper and deeper into crisis, and the leadership is just projecting this false optimism. They completely failed to grasp how bad things really were. So, in an attempt to fix things, Hoover's administration made, well, a catastrophic mistake. It was called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff. The idea was to protect American farmers by taxing goods from other countries. But the result? Oh, it was a disaster. Other countries immediately fought back, putting up their own tariff walls. It didn't just fail to help, it basically started a global trade war.
And the impact was immediate. I mean, it was devastating. Global trade was at $36 billion in 1929. By 1932, it had plummeted to just $12 billion. That's a $24 billion collapse. That tariff essentially slammed the brakes on the entire world economy at the worst possible time.
So with the economy in a total free fall, there was one last ingredient to add to the mix: pure panic. People were terrified they'd lose their life savings, and this led to bank runs. You'd see these huge crowds of scared customers all rushing to their bank at once to pull out every cent they had because they were afraid the bank was about to go under.
And a bank run is what you'd call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because even a perfectly healthy bank can't survive thousands of people demanding all their cash at once. The fear just spread like wildfire. In 1932 alone, almost 2,300 banks across the United States collapsed, taking the savings and the dreams of millions of Americans down with them.
So, how did all these things, the inequality, the bad policies, the panic, how did they all lock together? Well, they created this vicious, self-feeding cycle that trapped the whole country for nearly a decade.
And this slide just lays out that cycle perfectly. It starts when people stop buying stuff, so goods just pile up in warehouses. Then, to cut their costs, companies have to lay off workers. But of course, those unemployed workers now have even less money to spend, which means demand for goods drops even more. So what do companies do? They lay off more workers, and the spiral just keeps going down and down, completely strangling the economy.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, is that the Great Depression wasn't caused by just one thing. It was a perfect storm. It was this toxic mix of all these factors that had been building up for years. You had deep economic inequality, a consumer market that had hit its limit, a whole farming sector that was already in crisis, some fatally flawed government policies, and then that final wave of public panic that just brought the whole system crashing down.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty sobering thought, doesn't it? A crisis that was born from a massive wealth gap, from wild speculation, and from major disruptions to global trade. When you look at the world around us today, you really have to ask yourself, are those same ingredients for another perfect storm still with us?